What is really the vision?
If you have visions, you have to go to the hospital, making sure that we get enough formula to send it to China.
Would they question such a business model?
99.9% of companies are founded without VC money.
What is the meaning of life?
I don't think I'm that serious, but yeah, probably I was very concentrated.
欢迎回到元宇 YUVC。今天我们请到了专注在欧洲消费赛道的早期基金 BCG Fund 创始合伙人 Tino。Tino 是前德国上市公司 Windeln 的创始人兼 CEO， 前 BCG Digital Ventures 合伙人，欧洲头部基金 HV Capital 前身 Holtzbrinck Ventures 创始人。今天我们来聊一聊，把公司做上市再到破产是种什么体验？年近60，从头做一支风险投资基金意味着什么？从业30年，最失败的一笔投资又是什么？访谈有点长，记得先点赞关注。So Tino, I'm really excited to have this opportunity to have this episode of a podcast with you. You graduated from the university before I was even born, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I'm old.
Are you like 55 right now?
No, 50, 58. I'm turning 59 in February.
Wow. But you still look cool.
So when I started Windeln, I was 45 when we started it, and the IPO I was 50. So it's not like the sort of the young fund. But I've been around. I mean, I've been in the scene, if you will, the internet scene since 1998, which is like I was 33 at the time.
Yeah, a year after I was born.
Yeah.
I remember I watched the video that you delivered speech at NOAA 2015 in Berlin. Surely you gave a very serious look, you know.
Yeah, that's people tell me that I always look so serious, but I don't think I'm that serious. But yeah, probably I was very concentrated.
Founding a 200 million euro turnover company, like what's your biggest takeaway?
I would say it's not all about growth. We grew too fast, and our operations couldn't hold up with the growth. I mean, that's probably the biggest learning. So I'd rather take half of the growth, which is still a lot if you do 100 million after a few years.
What's a typical day in the life of a CEO of such a company? Like, you know, what kind of things would you prioritize? And would you be like having meetings all day long? I'm really curious about that.
I mean, first of all, I would say I'm not the typical CEO. So it's not, so whatever I'm saying doesn't mean that this is the life that of a CEO that it should be, because I see myself more as an investor and founder, and that's also one of the takeaways. At some point, we probably should have handed over the company to an experienced management team. On the other hand, if you do an IPO, you cannot sort of step down and say, "Hey, fine, I did the IPO, now I'm leaving." So that's why it's very hard to imagine the right moment. Probably there wasn't a right moment. It's not as structured as you might think. I mean, when you found a company, it's just a lot of hard work. So usually, I'm not a early riser, so I'm more like someone like an owl. So I like to work late and then go to bed like maybe between 12 and 1 o'clock in the morning. And but then I'm not in the office at 6 a.m. So I was more like the one cycling to the office at 9 or something like that, between 10. Of course, I already had my thought on the bike. But so I was doing the emails then in the evening when I was still in the office, and one of the last people in the office. But it's very hard to say this is the typical day that you have, because as a CEO, I mean, every day is different.
Yeah, like everything is ad hoc, right? There's always something that you have to prioritize last minute.
It's mostly meetings and calls during the day with your relevant teams that you manage. I mean, Alex and myself, the two founders, we're also very different personalities, but we had different responsibilities, and I was handling more the assortment and on the marketing piece and dealing with the suppliers. So I was doing negotiations on prices. I was making sure that we get enough formula to send it to China.
So speaking of the Chinese market, actually, I looked at the financial data of Windeln, and I found that in some years, actually, the Chinese market turnover accounted for almost 70% of the total, right?
No, that would be too much, but it was 50%, and 50% was when the high point was around 40 to 50% was the Chinese market. But when you talk about profitability, it was everything, because it was the only profitable part of the business, and that was very profitable. and that subsidized, if you will, the other business, and it allowed us to do an IPO, of course. But that then became a problem because once the Chinese business wasn't as profitable anymore, it didn't necessarily go away, but you had more competition. Danone, which is the owner of Aptamil, they then deliver directly to Chinese merchants, and so the prices came under pressure, and then we couldn't. It wasn't as profitable anymore, and we couldn't subsidize the other businesses, and that was a problem then.
So actually, your company was like one of a kind, as a European company, but like most of its turnover or profitability was built from the Chinese market. So
well, I wouldn't say it was one of a kind because but if you look at our German automobile companies, I mean, it's almost the same.
All right.
I mean, even if you take I mean, if you take VW, I think what's like 30-40% of the sales are from China, and I mean, and now that at least for the VW cars, the Chinese demand is going down. I mean, they run into problems. So we are not the only one, but for a startup, I would say yes, it's very unique. You're right.
Would European investors, whether be it institutional investor or private investor, would they question such a business model like most of your turnover profitability was contributed by Chinese consumers?
Had we started the company with that business, yes, then they would have probably not given us money. But since we originally, and that was always the idea until the end, build a European player, and since that business was very profitable, of course they didn't. I mean, we had discussions, but the discussions were never like, hey, let's not do China. The discussions were more like, how can we still focus on Europe despite the Chinese business, and let's not put all eggs in one basket and only do China. That was more the discussion.
Tino, you were also like a partner and managing director at BCG DV. What kind of things would you say you would unlearn, like as a consultant turned VC?
So when you advise a client and you have to talk about the markets and the models and the competitors and all of that, and put it into a great framework and sell it to the client, and that's not so much what I'm really good at. I'm better at I just have a good feeling for business models, for people, I think, so I can make an investment decision out of my gut feeling pretty quickly, where others might be more comfortable running numbers. I say we don't have to run a number if it's an early stage company. I don't have to look at the spreadsheet or the presentation. I just let them present the idea to me, and if I like the team and I like the idea. I mean, at Windeln we did, I think over the first 3-4 years, we had like 60 business plans. So any business plan you do will be useless after 3 months after you started the business. So that's why I'm more like, I feel more comfortable in either starting something or giving investment to something that's starting, rather than sort of consulting on established businesses.
Stats show that the average VC start their own funds at mid-20s and mid-30s to mid-40s. Actually, you're really an outlier in terms of this saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that makes absolutely, that makes sense. And I mean, if it was just the G fund as it is now, then I wouldn't say it's so much starting a new company, because then it would just be a 10 million fund, which is part is our money and then money from friends. It's almost like an outsourced family office. But we do have the goal of making this, because we have the 2 young partners, there is a goal to make this into a larger VC company. So in 3 years, I mean, as soon as they've either sold or handed over their startup to a manager, then we can go fundraising with institutions, and maybe hopefully the next fund in 2 or 3 years is a bigger fund. And then over time, you're building a VC company. That is the goal. And then, of course, Christoph and I will at some point phase out, and because we're not going to do this when we are 75 or 70. I mean, maybe as a senior partner, we still be attached to the company, but not sort of run the day-to-day business. And the 2 young guys take over. And so it's also a good way for Christoph and myself, for retiring, slowly phasing out and having left something for the young guys.
But like Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, haven't retired at their 90s, you know.
Yeah, Warren Buffett is a different beast, but and I would be interesting to know how much he still works. Probably full time. I don't know, Warren Buffett. Probably still every decision that Berkshire Hathaway is doing is probably still going through his desk.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's why it's just a nice way of keeping me busy and doing and it's just fun to still work with founders and also with the two young partners that we have.
Yeah. So what are the pain points and sweet spots of Europe as a venture scene?
I mean, there are things that are obvious that you cannot change. I mean, it's not a single market. It's not like US
Yeah.
where you can have 300 or 400 million people in one market and it's quite easy to expand in Europe, and even more difficult now with Brexit. But in general, it's just every country you have to take at sort of as a new investment almost. So that's a big difference to the US. Many people say, oh, there's less investment and venture capital is not as advanced. Certainly that's true, but I still think as a founder with a good idea and a good business model, you can get an investment in Europe.
So what is really the vision of G Fund?
I don't want to say it's a vision would be too much of a word. I mean, there's the
Okay.
I don't know if you remember there was a German chancellor. This was way before you were born. Helmut Schmidt. He was the chancellor of Germany in the 70s, and a very respected political figure here. I mean, he was smoking like 3 packs of cigarettes a day, and I think he died when he was 96 or something like that. But he said if you have visions, you have to go to the hospital. He always said. So first of all, it is return on capital. So we wanna return the capital at least 3 times, ideally 5 to 6 times back to investors. And secondly, if that hopefully by helping to build great companies, it's also something good for consumers. Because we don't invest in coal mining or in weapons. I mean, we invest in great products or services, and many of them. If you talk about digital health, if you talk about e-learning, if you talk about food, many of them are sort of helping consumers living a better life. So that I would say is B. But I wouldn't call it a vision. I mean, it's like any other VC fund, just that we have a focus on consumer companies. And and if you believe in consumers still, and if you want to invest in a good VC firm, then we are here. But our fund is closed now. But for the next fund, in 2 or 3 years, that could anyone who wants to invest, then we are of course open to taking the investment in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, so as I looked into your portfolio companies, I noticed this company called Milano Vice. It's quite interesting as I studied in Italy. So absolutely like a fan of pizza. So like, is it the company that you invested in? Like, so what's your investment thesis on that company?
At the end of the day, they want to build a brand like Domino Pizza, for instance.
Yeah.
So a brand that especially the young people know, but with less infrastructure.
At the end of the day, like, can I say that its USP is like better flavor than Domino's pizza?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it tastes good, and I don't eat much pizza, I have to say, not anymore. Yeah, it's just a cooler product, I would say.
Okay, great. So I would like our followers to leave a comment below to say if you have tried Domino Milano Vice.
Yeah.
In the next section, I would really like to talk about like what exactly you look for in a startup and a founder. Okay, so if I were a D2C consumable founder, what would be the quickest way for me to get your attention?
One thing is the reality, and the other thing is sort of what I should say. At the end of the day, it's having the first term sheet. So if you have a term sheet, I mean, that was always my experience. If you have if you just invest in a company quite recently called Space Goods in the UK, and the founder said nobody really made an investment for the first 2 or 3 months of fundraising. Then I got a term sheet by this First Season Ventures, which is a great consumer venture fund out of France. And as soon as I got the term sheet in First Season Ventures, I had left and right people who wanted to invest.
Right.
So there's a sort of there's a bit of and that also goes for us. There's a bit of a fear of missing out. So if you have a first term sheet,
kind of also herd
and
mentality.
suddenly people come and so now the question is what gets you your first term sheet and what gets you interested. I mean, at the end, ideally, you have in the consumer space, you have launched and have first numbers. So especially comparing your cost of acquisition compared with the customer lifetime value. If you do a direct to consumer business, selling off your website. So if it takes you 3, 4, 5 orders until you break even of one customer, then you really have to have a subscription business where you, on average, people stay for 12 to 24 months, which is probably hard. I mean, there are these cases, but then it's harder. Whereas if your customer lifetime value over your CAC is 3, 4 times, that's a very good number. Secondly, then you have to show that the market is big enough that you can not just grow. I mean, I always say this, like 99.9% of companies are founded without VC money. And then they're still good companies. But as a VC, you want to get the companies that creating a value of, at least for us, and we are not as crazy as Holtzbrinck Ventures or as Early Bird or as Index and so on. But even for us, within 5 years, you have to have a company value of over 100 million. And you have to show that the market is big enough for that, and you're not stuck in revenues with 1 million in profits, which is great, but which is not. It's then not a VC case. So if you have that, and if you haven't launched, and then of course it becomes harder and harder, then you just have to be a great salesman or saleswoman.
What are the biggest red flags you see in startups?
Let's talk about personality traits first, and then we can have other no-goes. So the personality trait, if the team is fighting, not fighting, but if they talk over each other in a call, or if one person is dominant, or I mean, that kind of thing is a no-go.
But there has to be a dominant founder, right?
Yeah, but yes, but you know this old saying that the best leader is the ones where people say they've done it themselves. But if there's one guy, if like Donald Trump type guy, me in a call, then because nobody can do it by himself, by herself. So that's sort of a red flag. I don't know. Many often it's just a gut feeling where you think like, do I think this person can build a big company? And that's a very delicate subject. But again, like you said, it depends if they have a corporate investor because I've seen not that I was invested in those cases, but I've seen 2 or 3 cases where a corporate then, especially when the company was doing well, that they at some point wanted to take over the company, and then they didn't agree to certain terms. Like the founding team wanted to do a follow, like a growth round, and they didn't want to do the growth round because they wanted to take over the company. And so that's also, I don't want to say no if a corporate is invested, but definitely the corporate shouldn't have the majority. But it's sort of a bit of a red flag where you really want to get to know the corporate and see whether they've behave like a VC.
So which deal made you the most hesitant? Like, it depends. After nights of thoughts, you still cannot really decide on whether to invest it or not.
Right now, we have a deal where I'm going back and forth. And that's a case where there's a corporate VC in there, of a corporate that potentially could overtake the company when it's going well. So you think like, maybe it's selling too soon then? Then I still make my money, but I don't make enough money because he could have grown it 2 or 3 times from that point. It's a tough industry. So yeah, that's where you go back, and there's no the valuation is pretty high already.
Mm-hmm.
Normally for where the company is at, you would say half valuation of half of that would be normal.
Yeah. Okay.
But
That's
again,
quite high.
he already has great distribution partners. The product is great. He has a very good corporate VC investing now in the round. Yeah. So you go back and forth all the time. The team,
Yeah.
Christoph and I go back and forth and think that we do calls. So we
Right.
are now, we need one more piece of information and then we have to make a decision. And yeah.
What was the investment that you didn't do, but it ended up really successful?
We had a meeting with a company called Check24 in Germany, which
Yeah.
is like the biggest comparison portal. And Axel Partners has invested in that then later on. And we had a meeting with them. This was in 2005. We had a meeting with the founder where the sales were 12 million at the time. And we just built a unit at Holtzbrinck that would own majority of these kind of companies.
Yeah.
And we said, we're interested, but we want to have the majority. And he said, no, I don't give you majority. And then like,
Actually,
if
that's a
I
good
had
sign,
said,
you know. That's a good sign if a founder
yeah,
says
but
so.
exactly. And we had two companies. We had Holtzbrinck Ventures and we had Holtzbrinck Networks, which was the company to sort of
Yeah.
take majority.
Okay. Understood.
So I could have said, probably if I had said, this is great, let's transfer this investment over to the venture side and let's give him whatever, a million for 5% or 10%. Probably rather 5%. Maybe he would have done it. And that would have been, I mean, the company it's private still, but it's probably worth 10 billion. I don't know, maybe 20
Right
billion,
now.
something. And that would have been an amazing investment had we done that. So I would say that is the biggest investment. But again, it was not a venture meeting, but this where we went back and forth. And with G Fund, it's too early. I mean, even if companies that we didn't do, you don't know yet if they became like these amazing, great companies.
If you had the chance to say something to yourself, who was just upon graduating from university, what would that be?
What would I say? The dedication that you have, the determination in order to get to reach a goal is way more important than intelligence or education or anything like that. Set yourself, and I don't mean like career goals. I'm not saying that someone leaving university should know in 5 years I'm here, in 10 years I'm here, in 20 years, no. You should be very flexible, but just goals like, hey, let's say you want to work in venture capital. Don't give up on the goal because it might be first you work for a consulting firm and then over time you so and the second thing is surround yourself with smart people, smart and good people, and that's also something that actually I tell my son, because I say like if you have a network of good and smart people, then at the end it's much easier for you to end
Yeah.
whatever it is, whether you found something or whether you work for a VC or whether you stay in consulting or whether you work for a corporate. But yeah, these are the two learnings I would say, or two lessons. Or, yeah, I would tell myself if I left
Just a follow-on question: is your son interested in venture capital?
Not yet, no. He's just right now. Oh no, not yet. I don't know. We will see. It's too young. He's 19. It's too young, but
Okay.
he's not the one where you say he's already like building a business with 18 and no, we will see. I think
Yeah,
now
we'll see.
he's also switching. He started with international business. Now he wants to do psychology. So he still has to find out what's best for him.
Right. So last question. So, what is the meaning of life?
Tough. I don't know. I think probably in some way leaving, I don't want to say a legacy, but leaving something behind when you leave, be it kids. That's why it's hard for me to understand if people don't want to have children, because that's also leaving something behind. Or in my case, it's of course kids, but then sort of have created a few brands like Parship, which is the leading online dating service, which I didn't mention. I once, when I was a student, I created football or soccer fantasy game, which is still played in Germany. We still play it to this day, 7 guys. We still play it for 30 years now, but it's a brand, Kicker Managerspiel. You can play it. So things like that. Or we're building a VC company, but of course not everybody gets to build a company. So it could also be kids. It could also be, I don't know, just something where you leave something behind. Maybe
something
building a
house. You call it maybe like a portfolio, right?
Yeah, or building a house, or helping other people. I mean, just something where you say, I leave something behind, and I know that not everyone gets to do that. And again, it doesn't have to be companies; it can also be other things.
Yeah.
That I would say is more like the meaning of life, but it's a tough question.
Yeah. So overall, these are all my questions. So thank you very much, Tino, for your time today. So let's schedule for a second podcast in 10 years then.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully by then I can tell you and some exits.